right now, when you think about an individual like Elon Musk, right, successful entrepreneur, right, and then he would share his advice about entrepreneurship. But then when you come this side and you try to use his advice, it's different because the context that he's operating in and the context that you are going to be operating in, like these are two very different contexts.
Yeah.
It's like when we have stories from African entrepreneurs, then we can relate to them because they are able to become successful from the context that we also share.
Absolutely. So I think there's a big difference between liking a story and engaging a story. I think we all like the story of all these big Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. Like we actually click we click the like button. Okay. But to meaningfully engage in how they got there, it's exactly as you say. So if you want, let's use e-commerce as the example. Not your generation, but my generation, okay, of entrepreneur, 20 years ago, which is when e-commerce and stuff started, okay. So if I'd had an e-commerce idea or 10 years ago, I was looking at eBay, Amazon and stuff as the examples, okay. And even if I found support for this idea, those guys could depend on a few things and take them for granted that I don't think people think about it enough. First of all, credit cards and online payments worked. Second, if you sent a package from one part of America to another, the post office would actually get it there in less than a day for a very little amount of money. So then people come to different parts of Africa and they're like, we're going to build Amazon. It's 2014, right? And then they realize, oh, but hang on, there's no payment processing, so I have to build that. And hang on, there's no micro logistics network, so we'd have to build that. So then they don't actually run e-commerce businesses. What are they running? They're doing Fintech and they're doing micro logistics and having to build this. And they don't have anywhere near the amount of money that they need to build all three of those things, because when they went to the venture capitalists, they were like, we're going to build an e-commerce website and we're expecting these sorts of returns. So my point is you're 100% right. So you've got to encourage young entrepreneurs. This is where I say adults are failing, because the advice should be, no, help build the payment stack and help build micro logistics networks. That's where the opportunity is right now, right? And that's the responsibility you have, because people did that in these more mature markets a generation ago. The people who are going to make it easy on just the selling and the drop shipping and all that sort of stuff are going to come. It's after you.
Yeah.
So does that make it clear?
Yeah, it does. It does make it clear. And because the example you gave about Amazon, I think it's a very vivid example, because most of the times people will be like, you know what, it worked on this region, it's going to work on this region too. And then when they come, it's a total disaster. It's a total failure. So I think it's good also for other young entrepreneurs to be able to realize that, right? In as much as they're inspired by companies such as Amazon, but they're going to be operating on like totally different contexts. And it's like, okay, in as much as we like the idea, how can we find a way to implement it in our context, on a different way, not the way they implement it, because, well, we are living in like areas that have like two different contexts, like very, very different.
Yeah. And I think sometimes you'll realize it, and as you're going, so you'll start an e-commerce company and you'll build the website, and then you'll realize I've got to do this other thing. So there's a good case study of this. There's someone who built an e-commerce website in the early days of the internet in South Africa, and they brought goods from overseas to South Africa in containers and then shipped them off. And then they realized they could just never make it big enough because of the failure in micrologistics. And then they built another company that aggregated all the courier companies in South Africa together, and they provided a service to small e-commerce stores to say, don't worry about the logistics. You just sell whatever you're selling, you put them in our warehouse, and we will get them out. And they aggregated all the courier companies together through they just aggregated it through some technology. And they built this really big business. But it took them a few years to figure out what the problem was they actually had to solve. right? They started solving one problem and then they realized it. And I think it's happening, you know. Look, the momentum on entrepreneurship in key verticals is significant, right? Fintech, micrologistics across Africa, it's really big. And I think young people are increasingly seeing it. Like, the market is moving. So it's easier today.
And speaking about fintech, well, East Africa, most East African countries will almost majority of the population they use mobile money, right?
Yeah.
Compared to like using their credit cards, and it's like an innovation that really changed lives because right now almost everyone has a mobile phone, right? Every adult and well, most young kids right now have mobile phones, so it's easy for them to be able to use mobile money compared to getting a credit card or opening a bank account. So it's good to see that young people are also creating innovations that are suitable for our circumstances, our situation, and our context too.
Completely. And that's why I say I think being a young entrepreneur right now is actually really exciting, because in most cases someone has started to solve these underlying problems, and it's not, and we shouldn't overly focus on technology. There are other businesses that are really, really important that we need for our economies to grow, and we always go to the tech stuff because it's exciting and it's sexy. But I think there are people who are solving a lot of, let's just say, things like regional integration of tax laws. If you want to get goods from like Kampala to here or Nairobi to Kampala, like, how does that all work, right? And I heard about this entrepreneur quite recently, and they've reduced all the costs for the entrepreneur who's just trying to sell. They've got some goods that this place next door really needs because they've done it, but the arbitrage was too high because of all the taxes and charges and whatever, and they've figured out how to massively reduce that. So now if you want to build something that manufactures a physical good, but in order for your business really to be viable, you need to be bigger than just in Kigali, and you need to go cross-border. Because let's be honest, Rwanda is a small market.
It's a small
right?
market. That's true.
You've got to, if you're going to build it here, like, you've got to get your goods out. So there are people working really hard on harmonizing the law, customs, and it's moving faster than I think people realize. So good time to be an entrepreneur.
A good time to be an entrepreneur.